My name is Elizabeth Ferenzi. I am on the board of the Cleveland Park Community Association. This is our first official meeting of the year, our first public meeting, and we welcome everybody here. If you're a member, thank you for being a member. If you're not a member, we really encourage you to join. And this is put on by the Safety Committee of the Community Association, and we really are looking for people who would like to join that committee as well. So I'm inviting anybody in this room and anybody else that you might know who might be interested to please come and join us if you like. I would like to thank and welcome 2nd District MPD Commander John Branch, who has been with us before and is also welcome here, as well as Ward 3 Council Member Matt Frumin, sister of the neighborhood who really also always listens to us. I would also like to acknowledge we have Cassandra Hetherington here with us. Cassandra, hand up in the back. She is our Connecticut Avenue Main Street Director, who coordinates with the businesses and is very up to speed on some of the things that they are struggling with. We have Swali Siddiqui here, who is an ANC 3C05 member. I don't think we had any other ANC members. I think I saw Rick Nash. Anybody else? Oh, Janelle, thank you very much. Janelle Paget. So we have some ANC representative members, and we thank them for coming. Hands up for any business owners in the neighborhood. Some of the people that I spoke to had great interest in coming because they had stories they wanted to share. So perhaps they will join us later, but I think that we were expecting some of the owners, and I certainly have some questions that were submitted by them. CPCA members. If you're a member of the CPCA, put up your hand and really thank you for being part of the neighborhood that way. And all of you others who are concerned citizens, we're delighted to see tonight as well. So I am going to introduce you to a fellow board member, Robin Halsban, who has been both instrumental in organizing the evening and is going to lead off by explaining the invitation essentially that was given to our two guests.
Okay. All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. Got to remember when you're asking questions, and for you too, we have to put the mic right up to our faces. I need to remember that too. Can you all hear me okay?
Yeah. Don't need to touch your left.
Yeah. I don't know. So what we did is we gave the panelists, and I don't think they need introductions, Councilman Frumin and Commander Branch, but you can all introduce yourself if you'd like in a moment. But we did present them with 3 questions to ask in their opening statement. We'll ask them to take, you can do it on the fly, I'm sure too, but we'll ask them to take 10, max 15 minutes so that we can then open up to Q&A. So the first question, and I can repeat these if we get, is the city overall is clearly experiencing an increase in crime, specifically in violent crime. Homicides have dropped in other major cities, Baltimore, Philadelphia, New York, Chicago, but in DC, the numbers are rising. We recognize that most of this violent crime is not in Ward 3, but we all care about what happens in other parts of the city too. So first, can you talk about what steps MPD or City Council are taking to deal with the rise in violent crime overall? Question 1. Question 2. In Cleveland Park, we are seeing evidence of major theft in our retail stores. We know that this is happening all over. It's not unique to DC, but can you tell us what steps MPD and the City Council are taking to deal with this? Some people are concerned that these are actually, this is evidence of people stealing to provide for their own families. So we're curious if there was any evidence of that. Question number 3, also in Cleveland Park, we've noticed an increase in low-level offenses that may not warrant a call to the police, but have an impact on our day-to-day lives. These include, from our own experiences and from talking to neighbors, drug dealings, loud gatherings late at night, outside, fights in public spaces, and public urination. What are some things the City Council and or MPD can do about these types of issues? What are things we as residents can do? And what do we maybe need to understand ourselves about what is illegal versus what just might be a nuisance issue about living in a city? So I'm happy to repeat those, but let's start with Commander Branch with first. Violent crime, theft, and the low-level offenses we see in Cleveland Park.
Great. It's good to see everyone again. Like I said, my name is Commander Branch. I've been here about 5 months. I'm getting to know the area quite well. As far as the violent crime in the city, of course, everyone is aware of the headlines. The crime is up in the city. I have my own hypothesis as why the crime is up. As you know, there's a TikTok challenge where kids were stealing these cars. That started like in the late fall of last year. Some districts really spiked up as far as the stolen cars. That's where we were. But of course, I'm always looking forward to see what may come of this. And basically what I believe, and it seems to be true, is that these kids get access to these vehicles and they're traveling to other areas that they don't normally go to. Think about it, if you live in a certain area, you don't have mobility, most of the crime is going to be done in that area. But now they're driving around, they're joyriding, they're riding around like, wow, look at this. Wow, 16th and K, Vauxhall Road, this is pretty cool. So that's what's going on. Most of our crimes are associated with these stolen cars, the Hyundais and Kias, but other vehicles as well. That's why we urge you guys to ensure that you make sure that you turn your cars off, that you watch your cars. We just had one taken the other day. There were two kids in the car, one 6-year-old and one 3-year-old. A gentleman jumps in the car, she goes into the store, car is gone, of course, and thank God the suspect dropped the two kids off. So that's what's really going on with that. We've initiated a robbery and suppression unit, and what we're doing is we're taking officers from each district, 5 officers and 1 sergeant, and we're placing those officers in certain areas where we know these crimes are really occurring. The crimes that are really coming into our area, the suspects don't reside here. They're transient. We have a lot of thefts, we have a lot of robberies, we have a lot of shootings, what have you, and they are always usually tracked back to the 5th district, the 3rd district, the 6th district, the 7th district. So that's what's happening. They're coming into this area, they commit their crimes, and they leave. So that's what we're doing with that. As far as the smaller crimes, the thefts, our CST, our crime suppression unit, has been extremely successful. They actually closed the case. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with the CVS thefts. I was about to say robberies. You guys are calling them robberies. You got to be calling them robberies. But they're thefts. So we joined forces with CVS. We actually got with their regional management. We indicted, actually not indicted, we actually got arrest warrants for 13 individuals, 4 adults, and I believe it was like 9 juveniles, if my math is right. So anyways, that was a very successful case. They did that. They took $25,000 worth of merchandise from CVS. I'm sorry, from Macy's, and those were the ones that were hitting all of the CVS's in the 2nd district, the 3rd district, the 4th district, what have you. So we did dedicate the resources for that. The attorney's office, the OAG's office, moved forward with that, and we have to hold people accountable. I've been saying that forever. When I started in the 7th district, we have to hold people accountable. You guys hold me accountable. I'm here. If I'm not doing my job, by all means, hold me accountable. You know, you hold the council member accountable. You vote for politicians, but we have to hold these, unfortunately, these defendants accountable. That's the main thing. And without the backing of the U.S. Attorney's Office and everyone involved, to include yourself, those of you who go to trials, you have to do your job, your duty. And if you know the person is guilty, you have to convict them. You know, it's not a matter of not convicting people, putting people in jail, what have you. If you don't, in my opinion, you become an enabler. And what it does is demoralize the police department. We put a lot of effort, a lot of time. The U.S. Attorney's Office puts a lot of effort and time in these cases. And when citizens don't do their part, if they are guilty, and if they're not, by all means, you know, don't convict them. But you have to do your part. You know, we have to send a message to everyone that this is not going to be tolerated. You know, and of course we have to give services to those in need. I'm a big proponent of that. I'm not someone that believes that everyone should be arrested or put in jail for everything. Not at all. But when you have habitual crimes, guys, kids out here putting guns in faces and taking cars, that's another level. People, they're not spray painting walls. They're not stealing little things from CVS. When they're out here actively robbing people and shooting people, it is what it is at that point, you know, in my opinion. You know, I have over 31 years, and I guess after 31 years of service, that's what I'll try, like an old judge, you know, he'll convict you or sentence you. So that's that. As far as the nuisance properties and actual crimes, things like say such as loud noise complaints, if it's not within the hours of 10 p.m. to 7 a.m., you know, if someone's a little loud, whatever the case may be, that becomes a nuisance. If there's a First Amendment assembly, I've had a lot of questions and issues down at the city center because they come out and they protest the fur trade, the fur businesses, what have you. Yes, it's a nuisance, but if they're on public property, right, they have a right to freedom of speech. We as law enforcement can't choose who can speak, who can't speak, who's allowed to protest, who's not allowed to protest. When I came on many years ago, believe it or not, I was protecting the KKK. They were marching down Pennsylvania Avenue, marching down. There was about 25 of them. And believe me, we were their best friends at that time. They had like 2,000 anti-KKK at that time. And I remember when the citizens was yelling at me and saying, how could you protect them? How could you do that? Don't you know they were hanging you by a tree? Don't you know this and that? And I get all of that. I don't agree with what they have to say, but I do believe in the First Amendment and their right to freedom of speech. You know, so I have to do my job and allow them to express their, even though I may not agree with it. That's my job. I can't be on one side or the other. I was at one point, I remember the Iraqi war came out, and it's funny how everyone thinks you're against their cause. So we had the anti-war and the pro-war. And I went to the anti-war, and of course they were like, you know, how could you support this war? I don't understand this. They're killing kids. They're killing people. And I told them, what makes you think that I support the war? And then I went to the other side. How can you be against this war? They bombed they took down the World Trade Center. You're a police officer. Well, what made you think I was for the war? So we're there just to make sure that a First Assembly occurs peacefully and that everyone gets their say. And that's our primary function. I hope I answered the questions. Thoroughly? Great.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Now I'm going to take a lead and stand, and you may choose whether you want
Close
to.
to your lips.
Okay, so I'm Matt Frumin. I'm the Ward 3 council member. I have to say, being in this room, there's lots of different organizations, but my sense is that this is the organization that John Corbell had led until recently, so I do want to recognize John Corbell, who we lost in the last year, who was such a pillar in this community. I'm going to try to do the 3 questions. I'm going to start talking about my philosophy on crime and public safety generally, and then try to fit the answers to the questions into that. One of the big things that's out there is that we need more police officers. We are low on police officers, and people are stretched very thin. I think we need to be really grateful to Commander Branch and his team for all of the work that they're doing, but we need to support them. I think you were asking for that kind of support. I think we on the council want to offer that support. The community wants to provide that support. We're going to need to have more officers than we have today, and we have to have the kind of accountability that Commander Branch is talking about. When people commit a crime, we need to make sure that they get the appropriate punishment for that crime and that we're holding them accountable. And that's a big part of what we need to do. A second thing that we need to do is relations between the police and some communities are strained in a way that is worse today than it has been in previous times. I think Commander Branch, who again we need to be enormously grateful to, he comes to us from the 7th District, which I'm going to talk about violent crime, which was acknowledged to be something different in other parts of the city than here. He was on the front lines of that, and it is a really challenging thing that we again need to be very grateful for. Part of what we need to do, and I think that the new chief gets this, I think the old chief gets this, I think MPD gets this, is doing everything we can to create links between the community and the police officers in that community. We need to be a team supporting each other as we're trying to tackle these crimes. One of the things that you hear about all the time is everybody knows who's doing the worst of the crimes, but they're not talking to the police about it. Some of that is rebuilding trust, and I think the department is committed to doing that, and I think that's going to be an important piece of what we do going forward. The third thing is both in terms of the precursors to crime and afterwards. We need to be providing the kinds of supports that are necessary so people can get into criminal activity, and you're seeing more and more talk about that. The mayor is talking about that sort of thing. There's an effort to have a focus on the folks who are the most likely to engage in violent crime crime and preemptively try to get them off of that path. We need to do that for those folks who are getting close to that sort of situation. We also need to really be providing opportunity to all of our kids in this city. One of the things that's heartbreaking, I mean, the idea that somebody was killed over sweet and sour sauce, the idea that we had people in our office today who talked about a killing around a hat. The people who do that don't have a sense of hope about their lives going forward. And the most important thing to do to keep that kind of thing from happening is to ensure that everyone in this city has a sense of hope about their future. Way too often you hear about people who think, I'm not going to live to be 21, so I don't care. We need them to believe that they're going to live to be 21 and that they're going to have opportunity. When people do engage in crime, they have to face accountability. That may be that they are in jail for a certain amount of time. It may also be that we do things to try to keep them out of that pipeline. There's a cycle that's going on. And one of the things that I think is different here, or maybe worse here than in other places, is that cycle. We were talking with somebody in the juvenile justice area, and they were talking about how one of the things that's happening is a young person may be shot and killed, and they could be my friend. And the person who shot that person now thinks, I'm a threat to them because I'm going to come and get vengeance. And there are so many guns out there that everybody's got a gun, and you get into these loops of violence, and you gotta break these loops. And you don't hear about fistfights anymore. It's the fights turn into people shooting at each other almost immediately, and we get these kinds of numbers that we're having today. So we need to do whatever we can to get kids off of that path and get people off of that path. Try to do it specifically. Violent crime. Who's doing what on violent crime? I think MPD is doing a lot of great work. I think the robbery suppression stuff is really important. I think that the curfew idea, at least as a thing to explore, I think is an important thing. I think there's really an effort to get out to the community. The new chief has talked about each district doing one community walk every week. What's that? Just left one? I mean, it's enormous, the efforts that are going on. The council, we recently passed legislation right before recess, emergency legislation, to try to increase accountability and tighten some things that were out there. One of the things that we addressed was a thing that MPD had raised about their ability to do pursuit. They felt that the rules had gotten so tight that MPD couldn't do pursuit of people, even if they knew that they had committed a crime, that they could just roll on by and the MPD couldn't chase after them. We tried to adjust those rules. I think part of what happened with all of that was that we got to a place that I think feels different, where it's a teamwork project, that we're all trying to work together to try to address these issues. The commander spoke about the U.S. Attorney's Office. There was a time when there was a lot of concern about how frequently they were bringing cases. And I think that's changing a little in response to this idea of we need to work together to tackle these problems. So on violent crime, it is very different here than it is in other parts of the city. And we are very fortunate, but we are all tied into this together. When you have that kind of thing happening in other parts of the city, it affects us, it frightens us, and we need to do things to address it. And we're never going to be safe until more of the people in our city feel safe and feel a sense of hope. So that's on the violent crime. On the thefts from the businesses, right? I think the that is happening a little bit less here today than it was a little while ago, and I'm grateful to MPD for everything that you've done on this. Part of the things that we need to do is it goes back to having enough police so that we have police on the street, having a presence, deterring that kind of crime. Another thing that's happening is you're seeing more and more businesses that are hiring security guards. If you go over to the Giant on Wisconsin Avenue, I was there this weekend, there was a security guard. Just presence can be a deterrent. The cameras can be a deterrent, and there's a big effort to try to encourage people and businesses to have cameras. There's cameras on the street that are being put up in the places where there is the highest incidence of crime. I think we're getting at that, but part of the question went to, why is it happening? And I'd be curious to hear what the commander has to say about that, but it could be about individuals who feel like they need to do something for their family, but it feels more organized than that. You know, they go in, it's a group, they know exactly what they're doing, they're coordinated, they take very specific things that they know they're going to be able to market in particular places, and they come and they go. And it could be that those people, that's the thing they can do, that's the way they can make money in order to provide for their family or family members, but it has a feeling of organization to it that you really want to see us get to the people who are ultimately behind it, as opposed to the kids who are going in and tearing the stuff off of the shelves. So I don't doubt that there is a need that drives it to some extent, but there's also an organization to it that's troubling. And I do think that MPD and the investigations that you guys have been doing is getting in front of that issue, and it's a little better today than it was before. The nuisance stuff and the things in the public space, this is an issue. We've been dealing with this in the ward for a while. Things have been happening in the ward that feel different than they felt like 5 years ago. You see more of that kind of nuisance behavior out in the public. There is, as the question it suggests, a line between what's unpleasant to someone's sensibility and what's really a crime. And looking at that, watching for where that line is tricky. Well, I was talking to a business owner, I'm not sure I see her here today, but there's a question of panhandling is legal. Aggressive panhandling is not. How do you decide where that line is? How do you make sure that we're maintaining levels of behavior that everybody can feel comfortable in, and not over-police? So it's a tricky spot for MPD to be in. They find themselves called on to address an issue, and they may look at it and think, God, I wish that didn't happen, but I'm not sure that it's a place where I can step in. We need to work together on that, but one of the big things on that kind of behavior, frankly, is folks on the street. So if we have officers on the street, that'll discourage that kind of behavior going over the line. Also, if we're out there supporting our businesses, that helps us to minimize that kind of behavior. So I think it's a working together thing, but it's also navigating a line of when behavior crosses the line and needs to be enforced, and there needs to be some enforcement, and when we need to let it roll off of our backs. And that's a tricky place. So I think with that, I will stop. I don't know if I went over my allotted time, but thank you very much. Yeah?
I just wanted to add one other category.
Can I bring you the microphone? Would that be okay?
Sure.
Nice and loud enough to
Sure. I wanted to add one other category because I do think the shoplifting, robberies, and the other stuff is important. There's also been a number of cars that have had broken windshields on various blocks throughout the neighborhood, sometimes more than one block on the same night, and I really have no idea.
More than one owner on the same.
Okay. And somebody here is saying wheels are being taken. When it comes to the vandalism of just smashing car windows, I don't know if it's part of an attempted crime to steal something from a car, or if people are coming in and just sort of vandalizing it, car after car on certain blocks. And what's the purpose? Is that gang related, or are these individuals just doing it for some random reasons? I really have no idea.
Thank you.
And I'll stand.
If you all don't mind, what we'll do is a question from the audience, a question that was sent in, which are largely amalgamated. We got a lot of the same questions, but an audience question, and thank you for answering it.
Great, yes. So as you know, I came from the 7th district, the most violent district in the city. A lot of homicides, a lot of shootings. Like I tell everyone, I couldn't go 2 days without someone getting shot. Here it's a little different. It's mainly property crime. And it's to your question as far as why they break into these cars. They're breaking into them because they're stealing items. In the 2nd district right now, we're leading, actually we're not in theft from autos, but we are in thefts. There's a lot of retail stores here, a lot of high-end retail stores. So people travel here throughout the city and the area to come here specifically to steal. The same thing with vehicles. In the 7th district, believe it or not, like I said, a lot of violent crime. My theft from autos are one of the lowest in the city. You wonder why, right? Reason being is because they know not to leave items in their car. They know, and you would be amazed. Every time I read these reports daily, and I read that a theft from auto occurred, and I look at the items that were taken: cash, purses, in the wintertime, fur coat, let me see, computers, audio equipment, those type of items. And believe it or not, even change, a few coins. We have a large homeless population here in the 2nd district, very large. We didn't have that in the 7th district. So even 50 cents, believe it or not, they'll take it. A box that is empty, they may believe something is in that box, a camera, but it's empty. They'll break the window to see if they can get something. A citizen sent me a video the other day. A car comes down the street, nice car, probably stolen. He's cruising, he's backing up, he's going back and forth, back and forth. They eventually get out, he looks in the car, breaks the glass, steal items. Also, plumbing equipment, that's a big concern here as well. They come in broad daylight, they'll dress up as plumbers or put on like a utility vest and steal items from these trucks. Some of these tools are worth $2,000, $3,000. One of the frustrating things for us is that these companies do not log or catalog their serial numbers. So I think as I spoke to last time, when we do recover items, we just have a jackhammer. Well, who does it belong to? Is it stolen? Is it not stolen? Is it theirs? They can say it's theirs. How do we prove that it isn't?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Well, I know there's.
Wait, I'm sorry, sir, can we, we're gonna move to a Q&A session, but I just wanted to make sure everyone has a chance. So, and we also need to have questions that were submitted beforehand. So we can come back around, but I would like to move on to.
Just so that we can
Yeah.
try
Of
to get
course.
as many people to have an opportunity to ask as we can.
Right.
in our-
And I'll try to be short.
Okay, thank you.
Can I'll just say a couple of things to that, but I mean, Commander Branch has obviously thoroughly covered it. I don't know. Raise your hand if you had something, a window broken and something stolen from your car. It is distressing, really, to think that there are people out there every night who are going around looking for things in a car that they can break the window. That's part of the reality of where we live. That actually isn't new. It might be worse, but I mean, it's been happening for years. This is the biggest crime in this area. It's gotten way worse, and the whole thing about hitting the contractors, that's a big thing, because that's a high dollar item. We have a Prius. We had our what's it called? Catalytic converter was stolen, and I had to buy something to put as a shield. You know, when folks identify a high dollar item, then they hit, and when they think there's something there, it's no skin off their nose to break the window. One of the things that can help here is if we had more officers and there was more of a presence patrolling, including at night. That's a lot to ask from a very stretched department right now. That's why we need to have enough officers so we can be patrolling in that sort of way. Another thing that's out there that's happening, and you actually see it, you see it on the list, is the role of cameras. You know, people have their Ring doorbells. I watched on one of the listservs, I watched one where it was a car pulling up back and forth in front of a house and then breaking into the car in front, and it's all on video, so that can help you. I've watched another where it was a kid who went up on a porch, and there he was. Somebody knows that kid. I saw it on the listserv. But those things actually help them do their job, and one of the things that the city is trying to do is make sure anybody who wants to have that kind of equipment can have that kind of equipment and help in order to enforce against these kinds of things.
And I'm going to say that on the back table is the information, the link to the city website, because there are rebates available for those kinds of cameras. If you're interested, you can buy them, install them, and get a rebate from the city. So it is yet another thing to do. Shall we take another question from the audience, and then we'll go to a, okay?
Can we just establish the rules from the
Yes,
audience?
yes, Robin.
Please do not take more than 2 minutes. I will be timing you, so please, less if possible, but I will cut you off after 2 minutes so everyone can get a question in if they want to. And please, if you want someone specific on the panel to answer your question, please let us know. And finally, get this mic right up to your mouth because it's really hard to hear otherwise.
It is hard to hear. And we are streaming. Okay, so who has a question that they would like?
Start. Hi, my name is Helen. I live on Albemarle Street. And I think there's 2 questions that I have. The first one is, it feels like the city's housing programs, like the Section 8 program, the Home First program, is bringing a lot of mentally ill people into the neighborhood, and some of the crime. Is that true? And when I was on a Zoom with a city official, I asked them what tracking mechanisms are there to see the impact these programs are having in the community. And the city officials said there aren't any tracking programs. I find that astonishing. Is this true? Is there really no tracking programs? And the second question I have is to me, like, I love what you're saying, and I'm hearing about there's got to be responsibility. But I read an article that said misdemeanors are now going to have jury trials in DC and not bench trials, which to me is a signal to say we're hoping more people will get off and not convicted, and it also requires a lot of time on the citizens to be on the juries. Is this true? Like, is that true? And what other signals are you seeing to hold people accountable or not, one way or the other? Do you have a person that you would like to start your answers?
Either one of them.
Sure. Let me.
Close to your mouth.
All right, close to my mouth. So there's a lot there. On the questions about the voucher program and Section 8 program. That program is a really important program that creates opportunity for people who wouldn't have opportunity otherwise, and has been transformative in many, many lives. And when you go to folks in the different buildings, and I see some of them here, they will say to you, 80%, 90% of the people who are in this community benefiting from a voucher are doing great, and it's been a very positive thing for them and for their neighbors. There are a number of people who need more support than they get through that program, and who maybe there are some people who could do great if they had more support, and there are some people for whom independent living might not be the right answer at the state that they're in. And we need to have a spectrum of housing options, and we need to be real about who we're serving and how we're serving them so that they benefit and the people who live around them benefit. Now, is that program driving all of the different crime? No. Is there some that's associated with people from that program? There is some, but the key thing about that program, from my perspective, and we are talking with folks inside of the government, inside of all of the different buildings, is we need to do it right. The idea is housing first, but housing first implies something's coming after. And you can't just, for some people, it's great. You give them a roof over their head and they thrive. I had a guy in the office today who lives in a building up on Van Ness, returning citizen, devoting his life to helping kids who might get caught up in the school to prison pipeline. Exemplary guy, great neighbor. He raised this issue about what do we do about the folks where there are real issues around them. And we're in our office are trying to figure out what are the best things that we can do on that. I'll tell you, on the campaign trail, I was knocking doors on the western side of Cleveland Park, and somebody asked me to come sit on their porch, and they said when the Brooks was proposed, they fought it with everything they had, and they said, but I was wrong. It's worked pretty well. And I thought, how often does somebody, go out of their way to tell you that they were wrong? And then I went 3 doors down, and another guy said the same thing. When you do it right, people will accept it. When you're not getting it right, people won't accept it, and we have to get this right. So that's on that issue. In terms of tracking, the folks who have the best data on this is MPD, because they have a record of all of the buildings that they visited, what all the different kinds of incidences are. There is a little bit of a see no evil, hear no evil. We need to acknowledge the problem, and increasingly folks in the city government are acknowledging the problem. And I really, really want to stress that we're talking about a small minority of the people in this program that are the ones who are creating issues. So that's that. On the signal, which talking about misdemeanors, it was part of the revised criminal code that misdemeanors with 1 year in prison would get a jury trial. And you could see that through whatever prison you want. Today, that is the case almost every place else in the country. So when a person is facing a year of prison time, they get a jury trial. Our code had not been revised for close on 100 years, and that revision would have harmonized it with what happens in other places. There was pushback on it because of the administrative burden that you're talking about, and it ended up, we know what happened with the revised criminal code, but it is not the law right now. It died with the revised criminal code, and we'll see what happens when that issue gets revisited.
I'll take that. Unless you have something to add.
I'd love to hear his perspective on the
Okay.
crime versus the section.
Yes, well, when I actually first got here, I was told that crime did go up based on, of course, that program. I do agree with the council member. I think there's a lot of people who have benefited from it for sure. Giving people opportunity, I'm totally for that, 100%. But once again, I'm a police officer, right? I think that we have to hold those accountable who need to be held accountable. I think that if there are no rules, if people don't feel like they have to go by the rules, then they're going to do what they want. I hold my officers accountable. They'll tell you, when you break the rules, I'm not going to just look the other way, because that can lead down a path that we don't want them to go to, right? It just gets worse and worse and worse. In my opinion, I kind of made this up, but I think there are 3 people who don't commit crime. I think there's one person that just morally, they just, in their heart, they just won't do it. They were raised right, whether it's the Bible, whatever the case may be, they won't commit a crime even if you allow them to. Then there's a segment that if you allow them to, and if I said right now, you could rob one bank, all of you, and I guarantee you will get away. I guarantee you a lot of people in this room are going to rob that bank, including some police officers. It's just the way they are, right? And then you have one group that's just going to rob because that's what they do, they're criminals. So that one group, the deterrent, and what keeps people from robbing the bank are consequences. They're afraid that they're going to go to jail, right? Their reputation is going to be ruined. They're going to lose their job. How will their parents think of it? I mean, and that's just my opinion, and I think it makes sense. So we do have to have that deterrent. I think that when people are living in these residences, and actually I met with a group today, one of the managers, and I want him to identify those people who he's having issues with, smoking weed outside, drinking, what have you. They need to change their behavior. I grew up in the 7th District, right? I come from there. I went to DC public schools, whatever. You have to change their mindset, and that's what I want to do. I want to sit down, talk to them, say, look, I understand where you come from. You can't bring that here. It's a different environment. If I go to a certain neighborhood, everyone's grass is cut, looks like a golf course. How do I look having my grass 2 feet high? The neighbor's gonna look at me like I'm crazy. I'm not painting my house, I'm not doing those things. So you have to conform and adapt to your new surroundings, right? He was successful. Actually, I was talking to this manager today about that. And he actually spoke to one tenant he has a lot of problems with. He was pushing back. He started the process to get him evicted. Next thing you know, he started having more conversations, and the guy started to change his behavior. The neighbors are happy. He's not smoking weed all over the place. He's not drinking his beers out front of the house. So that's the thing of changing the behavior, and that's what I'm trying to do. So that's what my plan is with all of these apartments, to go about, talk to management, sit down, whatever residents you're having problems with, and just talk to them, have a conversation, you know, and believe it or not, you can change people's mentality, change their perception. But if that doesn't work, then guess what? In my opinion, then you have to use the stick. We have to go, you know, and do what we have to do. It just is what it is. And that will send a message to everyone else. Am I wrong? You know, if we're going to evict her, everyone else is, ooh, okay, I better tighten up. I kind of better follow the rules. And that's just my opinion.
So Elizabeth, we'll take one from that was submitted ahead of time. if
I
that's
was going to
okay.
say, we got many submissions, and we tried, as I said, to combine them when we could. So in the interest of fairness to all of the people who couldn't be here but who are streaming, Robin is going to read some of those questions as well. Robin?
So to start with, there is a question about the voucher issue too, and I do want to mention that in terms of tracking, maybe I'm not sure if this is what you were asking, but the Department of Human Services actually does have a voucher program dashboard, and there is a way to see which wards, and there are several different voucher programs, and you actually can go see that in Ward 3, the permanent supportive housing voucher for individuals, Ward 8 actually has 208. We're the second highest of all the wards. So you can actually see those numbers. So I don't know if that's the kind of tracking you were talking about, but you can see that if you want. But as Councilman Frumin said, this is the type of voucher that it's the housing first philosophy, meaning something comes second, which is case management. So Commander Branch, the kind of work you were talking about sounds like case management types of work. And so some of the questions we got are about the staffing capacity of that case management. So a lot of these people who get these vouchers are coming from challenging, traumatic life experiences, and they need that case management, but there is a shortage in the city of that staffing capacity. So I think this is more for Councilman Frumin. Is the city doing anything to help increase the capacity? I know there's talk about legislation around reducing the requirements possibly for social workers, but some of the people who submitted questions would like to hear, what is the city doing about that staffing capacity?
Sure, and this is a really important issue, and the case management, it's critical that we have more case managers in place. And in some cases, folks, the requirement is that there's a visit from the case manager once a month. For some people, that's enough, but for other people, that's not nearly enough in order to be able to be helpful. And for other people, and I'll point to, there's a place down on Connecticut Avenue, Woodley Place, that is a transitional housing place that helps people who need more support than a once-a-week visit from a case manager would provide. And we need that full spectrum. And it is a very serious issue that there is a shortage of social workers. A couple of things that the council is doing. One is there's a test to qualify as a social worker, and there's a lot of evidence that the test is more of an unnecessary barrier than a protection of social workers go through apprentice programs, they have to do different kinds of things, and that if we didn't have, if that test wasn't a requirement, we could have lots of people who were qualified to be in a position to be helpful to folks and do that kind of case manager work. Sometimes the case managers end up not being social workers, they end up being something else. And so we don't lose anything by making that change. That's my opinion. I get emails in different directions on that. There are some folks who feel like it diminishes the value of a social worker degree, but the evidence looks very powerful that the test is an unnecessary barrier. The other thing that is out there is Councilmember Robert White has a proposal to fund a free school of social work at UDC. And that is a really important idea that checks a lot of boxes for our community, I believe. One is we do have a fair number of people who need services in this area. We can have more social workers. They can be trained right here. There can be district residents with lots of experience. Second, for me, UDC is something of a mission. I would like to see UDC much stronger. I'm very excited about the new president, but if we can strengthen UDC, it also helps the corridor generally. So I think that trying to fill the pipeline of social workers is a priority for the council, and I hope that we get that through and get it funded in the next budget.
Thank you very much. I'm starting to hear a lot of mid and long-term solutions to some of the things that I feel like we have come here to talk about, and I'm also interested in hearing what's happening now with some of these questions. Okay, from the audience, does anybody have a question?
Good evening. My name is Noah. I'm a 7-Eleven owner. I own a corner on Connecticut 3433. My name is Noah. I'm the 7-Eleven owner on the corner, 3433 Connecticut Avenue. So there's two questions I have a lot to say, but it's 2 minutes, so I'm going to keep it in 2 questions. One is for you, sir. I have so much case being created, but I never seen a result of it. I called, they give me, create a case, get a report, nothing. About a month ago, I got robbed. A day before, the guy who robbed me, who was at a street market, but the employee never called. And I went and talked to them. I said, why don't you call? They said, police don't show up. It takes forever to show up. So no matter what we do, it doesn't matter. So this guy came back and the following week and robbed me. Took $1,300 worth of cigarettes. So that's the story of it. And then the reason is, she's right when I talk to the manager. Because sometimes you call 911, this is the only 911 is put you on hold. I don't know why. It's an emergency line. Why is it in a hold? They put you on hold 20, 25 minutes. Okay? Another case I have is Miss Rita. You probably know this lady. She lives in somewhere around here. My 8-year-old daughter's terrified right now. I told a lot of police officers, if I see that lady, the story is going to be different. Because she said in front of my 8-year-old daughter, she had a gunshot. She's going to bring me and shoot me in the head. A shotgun. So every day I go home, my daughter said, is the lady kept? But you guys haven't done anything. 7 years, this lady abused me and my stuff. What do we need to do? I heard the good things you guys saying. As a taxpayer, I'm not satisfied. I know you people say short-handed. And another excuse they're giving me is, it's the politician. They took a lot of power away from us. So what are we going to do about that, the long term? It's not going to be slowed down. The crime is not going to be slowed down. 2 weeks ago, cost me another $10,000. Broke two of my windows. A detective called me every Sunday, 10 a.m. while I'm in church. I don't know why. Why is 10 a.m. on Sunday? Does he work on Monday to Friday? I'm asking. I mean, isn't it? Or he just want to say, "Oh, I done my job." Is that the reason he's calling me 10 a.m. 2 Sundays in a row, 10 a.m. in the morning while I'm in church? If I keep talking, it's going to take an hour. So I'm just going to stop. But that's what I want to ask. One thing I want to ask you, help from you guys. There need to be more officers. If you compare it 7 years ago when I came to this place, we used to have a foot police officer. The crime wasn't like this. I had to move from the other side of the city, come to this location because of what I saw was worse. I want to live for my kids, you know. But how long? How long do we have to keep saying that? Oh, a shortage of officers. And the other thing is, why is 911 they got to put you on hold? There's a TikTok video I saw the other day. I was laughing. This kid comes in, asks for another kid, say, call anybody right now. I give you $10,000 if they pick up. You know what he did? He called 911. He knows that it was supposed to. So he took $10,000 from him. But DC, I said, I hope he called in DC who put you on the hold.
I think I heard a lot of different questions there, including police response when they are reached and 911 being very difficult to reach, which we all have seen in the Washington Post as an acknowledged problem. So that's actually two questions. What's happening when a single store owner is facing continued problems, harassment and robbery, and then we can talk about the 911 system together perhaps. Thank you.
And the crazy lady.
Yes.
And the crazy lady.
So as you know,
Not just crazy,
officers.
just threatened to kill
Yes.
through his daughter.
And
That cannot be acceptable in any jurisdiction or any society. It's outrageous.
Agreed.
I'd like to hear from you tomorrow on what's being done about it.
Yes.
You know?
So the Office of Unified Communication does not fall under the purview of the Metropolitan Police Department. It used to. It's civilians. So what happens is they get their calls, and I don't know the process. You have to actually talk to someone from that office. But there's many times, believe it or not, an officer will come to your store or to your call, and they're getting yelled at, and they're like, what's going on? We called you an hour ago, we called you 30 minutes ago, and the officer, literally, I just got this call like 5 minutes ago. So they may hold on to the call for a number of reasons. Maybe it's because they're prioritizing the calls. It's like triage. If it's a theft, but we have robberies going on or shootings going on, the theft is going to be a lower priority. That's what's going to happen. If it's a damaged property, somebody broken glass, that's a lower priority. If you're being assaulted, if you're being attacked, whatever, that's a higher priority. They're going to move that to the top. So that's the reason for that. As far as the mentally ill person, we definitely need a partnership with our DBH. As we all know, the events of 2020 with Mr. Floyd's death, it changed the world. It really did. There's people who believe that we shouldn't do traffic stops anymore. There are people who think that we shouldn't deal with any order maintenance crimes, urinate in public, any minor offense, because they're afraid we're going to shoot someone or it's going to get out of control. There are people who believe we shouldn't deal with, like I said, mentally ill people. And I get that. We're not trained professionals. We're not counselors. We're not doctors. But the bottom line is they call us for everything. You call us for everything. You get shot, you get robbed, you get raped, you got your car stolen, you lose your tags, the neighbors talking too loud, you got a dispute in the store because you think they gave you $1 less than they should have. Fire, the fire, believe it or not, we're going for fires, right? We're going for everything. A person who's mentally ill, walking in the street, they don't call DBH, they call us. Why? Because we're accessible 24/7, right? You call us, we're going to come. Now, I don't know if I totally agree with you that you say we don't come, because we do come. It may take a while, but like I said, that's contingent on a couple of different issues. Why? Now, as far as the mentally ill person, right, that's a problem that is a mental health issue. There are people that believe that what we're going to do, lock her up, and if we do, they're going to let her out. It's a mental health issue. I mean, is it on the police department? Is it on the Department of Behavioral Health? That's the thing. Does she need other services? And I agree with the council member 100%. You know, we need to provide services for people. Police officers are here to deter crime. We are not here to basically raise kids. We're not here to do all of that. That needs to be done separately, right? If you put 1,000 officers in this district, think about how large this is. We're here right now, and think about all the buildings and streets and alleys. And how do you police that? If I'm driving down the street, police scene, looking around, someone's on the other block robbing someone, right? How do I see that? You know, it's just timing sometimes. They're breaking into cars. Someone breaks into a car. They're walking down the street. I come down the street after the fact. They're just walking. Am I going to stop them? No. You got to catch them in the act. What are the odds, the right time that you have to actually witness that crime? So it's very challenging for us. I mean, and think about it. When you're driving around this district, just drive around and think about all the buildings, all the blind spots, all the different spaces, the vast area, the wood lines, and imagine yourself being a police officer in that area. And how would you see everything? You can't. That's why you have to help yourselves with, like I said, making sure your valuables in your house. You know, help us out. You know, we're going for those crimes, and guess what? Your house is getting robbed, or your store's getting broken into, because I'm dealing with the theft from auto, right? I'm dealing with all these other little issues, the minor issues that people are calling us, the homeless person, the woman screaming and yelling in the street. That's what I'm dealing with. It's still dealing with the woman or somebody breaking into your store or other priorities. So yes, we stress that.
I'm gonna ask if Councilman Frumin could actually answer this too, and maybe we can talk about the critical response CRT as a that I know that has been created, a department to deal with that. And I have called CRT myself about this woman Rita because I've seen her doing very aggressive panhandling. But I don't know if CRT.
That sounds like a crime, by the way.
That sounds like assault.
It sounds like somebody threatening to shoot somebody goes beyond.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a little suggestion that somehow I might condone that, which I absolutely do not, and I agree with you. That is a crime when someone is threatening in that sort of a way. There's a lot there, and I'm going to try to touch on it. And one of the things that you talked about was the robberies that you've experienced, and nothing's happening in response to that. And that is very, very frustrating. And we get into a thing where we're saying it's this one's fault or it's that one's fault. I mean, I do think that MPD has been stretched really thin, and that we need to expand the force and have more folks on the street who could help deter those kinds of things from happening and be in a position to pursue those things when they happen. And so some of it is that we need to support MPD now, acutely now. Another thing that came up, and the commander talked about it, is all of the things that MPD is asked to do. Some of them, it sounds like you want to keep doing. Some of them are things that others might be better equipped to do. Some of the social work sort of things, MPD often is involved in domestic disputes and things where there's somebody with a different skill set who might be better, and we could use the MPD resources in a different kind of way to address the things that you're talking about. Our police are on the street to enable you to be in business so that you don't get robbed in that kind of predictable way where something happened 1 week earlier and then it happens again. So helping to strengthen MPD, I think, is a critically important thing. On the Office of Unified Command, this isn't going to be that popular. They have clearly fallen down on a number of controversial things. I've toured it a couple of different times, and we have a relatively new director there who I actually have a fair amount of confidence that she wants to do it right, she wants to get it right, and I think she has the capacity to get it right. We aren't there right now, but I do think that we're trying, and I think I like the person who's in place who's trying to drive to make that better. So sometimes there's a problem and it takes a while to fix it, and it's terrible that it's taking a while, but I do think we're going to get there on that particular issue. One of the things was, what is the council doing to support the kinds of things so that we don't have this kind of division and this kind of sense that the commander was referring to not being supported and that we're not all working together to get stuff done to make folks safer. And I do think that the steps taken just this summer with the passing of the new legislation at the request of the mayor, with the new chairman of the Judiciary Committee, and with the support of MPD, I think that was an important thing for what it did and also for the message that it sent. Because there was an environment of feeling like people were at odds with each other, and then there was tangible evidence of people working together. A different thing that in the world of finger pointing, and finger pointing can identify a problem. There was a lot of talk about the shortcomings of the U.S. Attorney's Office, that they weren't bringing cases. And imagine how frustrating it would be if you're an MPD and you make an arrest, you put together a case, and then the U.S. Attorney says they're not going to prosecute it. And you can get this sense of there's no point to this because it's going to go nowhere. Well, I do think we're seeing evidence from the U.S. Attorney's Office that they're being more aggressive, that they've heard this criticism, that it's stung, and they're doing more. And you see it in a couple of the different prosecutions that are happening. I do think we're getting so that we're more on the same page and pulling the wagon in the same direction to try to make things better than they had been. It's a long way to go, but I do think there's more teamwork today than there was a year ago. CRT? Did you want me to talk about CRT?
Oh, yes.
I mean, because, there are folks out there who have enormous needs, and this is that small minority, and when they threaten your life and terrify your daughter on your behalf, that's not okay. And if it has to require criminal responsibility, it has to require criminal responsibility. It also is a mental health issue, and we do need to have the professionals in place who can meaningfully address those kinds of issues so that they don't happen. And to MPD's credit, you have Natalie Charles in your office who does that kind of outreach. It's not that she should do it all, but she can help identify those issues and bring in more professionals who can help on issues like that. And again, identifying it, if it requires accountability, and it may in that setting have accountability, but it certainly requires attention from professionals to try to keep that kind of thing from happening.
Thank you. And actually, Officer Charles was invited here tonight. She couldn't be here, but her business cards are on the table if anyone wants to connect with her. Oh, sorry.
Yes, sir. I'll ask your information. Evidently, this woman seems to be an issue or a problem throughout this neighborhood. You're all aware of her, so we need to address that situation. If we need to get a warrant for arrest, we will. It looks like it's going to be some type of mental health issue, but we have to ensure that we follow up with the proper agency to provide her those services. All right?
Just for your info, she got arrested 3 times in my store in the past.
So please have done something.
Yeah, I mean,
Right? So we have done something.
She's back to the street.
Okay, yeah, but we're not in charge of that. We arrest people.
Yeah.
If they get out, we have nothing to do with that. They go through the court system, right? It's not like people think that we arrest people and say, oh, you let them right back out, or you let them back out.
Well,
We don't let people out. We arrest
pointing
people.
out to you,
They go through the store. Yes.
and, finger to you guys.
I got you.
My point is, I talked to a lot of police officers. They're all saying is, we're shorthanded, and a lot of, since you said back in 3 years ago,
Yeah.
what happened, they're shorthanded.
Yes, we are.
Shorthanded, you can't chase someone, you can't hold someone above your neck.
Yes.
I mean, all this law put it away from you guys not to do your job. So that was the question, what are we doing to help you guys? Not a finger pointed out to you guys not doing the job. Yes, another thing is not coming on time, because if there's only one officer from Willie Park all the way to the circle, what's the chance of this guy is going to show up, this officer, in 10 minutes? Not really.
Yes.
So my thing is, what's the long-term solution for this? We can't have short police officer in the city.
Yes.
I mean, crime is going to go up, and not going to go down.
Thank you. I do want to move on to another question, and maybe we can talk afterwards around the specific problem, because it seems to be. I'd like to get one from who was submitted earlier, and then we'll go back to the audience. One I'm just going to read. We don't have to answer this question, but I do think it's important to hear what this woman has to say. From Anna Furman, I'm the owner of Proper Chopper, a 33-year-old retail business at the corner of Newark and Wisconsin Ave, next to the 2nd District Station. Can you address the community's concerns about security issues in the area in front of my shop, specifically in the plaza area bordered by Giant Food, CVS, Proper Topper, and Blue Mercury? A group of aggressive, often inebriated, frequently threatening panhandlers have taken over the area in recent years. This summer, their presence, coupled with increasingly rampant shoplifting in the surrounding shops, has made this formerly family-friendly neighborhood feel dangerous at all hours of the day and night, something I hear complaints about from customers and neighbors daily. MPD is called frequently, but when they do actually respond, which is rare, they spend a few minutes on site then leave, observing various and sundry unconvincing reasons why they can't help. Earlier this year, I was assaulted in front of my shop. Despite a successful arrest and ample eyewitness accounts, MPD failed to charge the woman who assaulted me, releasing her after a few hours under arrest. Last month, I again witnessed an all too common assault and resultant police response that ended with no arrest, no punishment, no effort to discourage the same person from returning to commit the same violence again. Can you suggest ways we can work together to make this a safer, more secure space for our neighborhood? I think we've talked about this a lot, but if you want to add anything, I guess.
It seems like the same question, but from Wisconsin Avenue.
Once again, we arrest. We do not release. It's not our determination. We charge somebody with a misdemeanor crime. They can get citation if they meet the criteria, if they go through pretrial services. We don't decide whether they stay arrested or not. So if we put them in handcuffs, we do not make the decision at that point to let them out. So once again, it's about accountability. Evidently, this young lady has been arrested numerous times. She's back out there. She's not receiving the services that she needs, right? And I'm not saying she needs to go to jail, but she's not receiving the services she needs, is my opinion. We keep locking her up and she keeps coming back out, right? So something has to be done. And is that an MPD issue, or, we can discuss that, but she needs assistance, she needs help, and I think she needs to get the help she needs.
Does this mean you also need more coordination with the Attorney General's office?
We coordinate with them, but we don't decide whether they release or not.
Likely the U.S. Attorney's Office.
Yeah.
Because it's independent.
So we don't determine whether they're released or not. We'll argue our case, whether they decide to paper or no paper. There's a number of factors why they would consider no paper, not to proceed with the prosecution. There's a number of factors, and they can answer to that. But like I said, we do not decide to do that. We present the case to them, and then they make the determination. They're the gatekeepers, and decide based on whatever criteria. We do have different standards. We rest on probable cause, which is about 51% belief that someone committed a crime. But they do have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt, about 80%. So I do understand that. But sometimes we have cases that the evidence is pretty strong, and for whatever reason, I don't know why, they could address each case individually. I can't speak for that.
Excuse me. I just want to ask this question because I am really very frustrated. I'm very frustrated because Rita has terrorized everybody. Everybody. We have all been held hostage by her. She has tried to break into our homes. She has terrorized our children. She has terrorized our elderly. I've seen her be arrested. I've seen her kicking the police, biting them, and they put handcuffs on her. They even tie her feet together. And then, a few hours later, maybe 2, she's right back out here doing the same thing. And I hear all of you, I appreciate everything you said, but I'm sitting here frustrated because I'm saying to myself, I moved to this neighborhood so I can move about freely. And now I'm hostage in my house after dark. And so what's for us? I appreciate people need housing. I appreciate they haven't been as fortunate. But some have made some bad decisions. And they're still making bad decisions. So what happens to us? Are we to just be kind and be politically correct and not say, how do we solve this? Because the things you're talking about are long term. What happens tonight? What happens tomorrow? This gentleman here who owns the 7-Eleven,
I like to go in there sometimes, but I don't go because I'm afraid he's going to get robbed while I'm there. So he's losing business. At the same time, somebody's robbing him of the money he did make. I'm just frustrated. Who do we talk to, and do we get them all in the same room at the same time?
I agree 100%. You're frustrated? You're frustrated? I agree 100%. You're frustrated and you weren't even kicked. You weren't bitten. You weren't punched. Those officers were kicked, bitten, punched. Do you think they wanted to let them go? Do you think that maybe they wanted to keep them and arrested? But like I said, that's beyond our purview. No, I'm talking about the officers. So you're saying you're frustrated. What about the officers that responded? Was kicked, punched, spat on, fighting? Now they have to do an investigation. I have to look into make sure the use of force was done properly. Any violations they may have occurred that I have to address. So like I said, so the thing about it is we want to obviously do our job. We want to, of course, punish them if they need to be. And if it's a mental health issue, then they need to have that. But the thing about it is they constantly being let out. That's not on us. We can respond. And it's frustrating for us, too, to keep responding for her.
Who?
Right? It is. Who's what?
Who's letting them out?
Like I said that.
District attorney?
Yes.
Let's get them here.
Yes, exactly. We don't prosecute, right? So they'll release
That's
them.
what we need.
They'll no paper them. They'll whatever the case.
Is the U.S. attorney, is this like policy set by the
Yeah, so a couple of different things. So in terms of that turnaround, that 2 hours kind of thing, that's pretrial detention, and that is a subject of district law, and that is the fundamental subject that was addressed in the legislation this summer, was to change the presumptions around pretrial detention in the setting of violent crimes. So I could stand here and say it's all the U.S. attorney, but it isn't all the U.S. attorney. It is the rules around pretrial detention that were just the subject of attention this summer. You get to a situation with the U.S. attorney where they get the file, and it isn't within 2 hours, but they get the file and they look at it and they make a determination whether they think they can prove that case beyond a reasonable doubt. And so frequently, for a while, they were not pursuing those cases. Now, there is a terrible irony here because our U.S. Attorney's Office is swamped. And the reason that they're swamped is they're pursuing enormous numbers of prosecutions around January 6th. And so they're strained with that job, and then they also are the prosecutors for local crimes involving adults, and whether or not that had an impact on their workload, had an impact on the number of cases that they were not pursuing, that's an open question. But what I was trying to get at before is there appears to be a change where the U.S. Attorney is pursuing more cases than they were before and being strategic about it. So on both of the things, on pretrial detention and on the activities of the U.S. attorneys, there is a difference today than there was 4 months ago. The council acted to make pretrial detention easier, and the U.S. attorney is being more active in pursuing prosecutions. Now, are you seeing that in the day-to-day? Maybe not yet, but it is action that has been taken not someday far off into the future, but now. To your question about, when are we going to get these more police, because it's a real problem, and we have we have as many retirements, at least as many retirements as we had recruitments. The other thing that the mayor and the city council have been doing is trying to strengthen the incentives to bring more people into the police department, to bring more local people into the police department who have connections to the community, frankly, to bring more women into the department to help strengthen the ranks of the department. Does it translate into a huge infusion right away? No, but are we pushing in the right direction? Are we trying to take tangible steps in order to have more police who can be out on the street and pursuing these investigations? Yes, there is action now. I share your frustration. I'm learning about Rita. Maybe I've heard about Rita before, but I don't remember hearing about Rita. That one, our office needs to learn more about that situation in order to understand who's falling down here, what's going on. Because when I was talking before about the voucher program generally and saying, and I don't know on what basis Rita is here, but there are, it's not a huge number of people who are creating a huge problem. And we need to address those issues. We need to address it for their sake, and we need to address it for your sake, because you deserve to be able to live in a place where you feel comfortable and safe.
The microphone is here right now, but I think we'll just keep it going around the people who have come tonight. So
I'll try to be quick, and it's hard to follow our neighbor who is so incredibly eloquent, and thank you. Very, very articulate, and you're right. And I came to Washington 40 years ago as a very idealistic person and worked in the public defender's service and worked in a lot of very, very different neighborhoods. And I hear you that we are privileged to live here, for sure. And I didn't get to live here till more recent years. But what really bothers me, and I hope you will think about, Commissioner, is that we are constantly hearing about how much luckier we are here than in other, and what we are trying to communicate to you is, yes, of course we are. We're not experiencing these murders and we're to the same level. But we are experiencing crime at a level that we haven't experienced before. And our children, I mean, I was a 20-something running around many neighborhoods that were nowhere near here, and I felt safer than my own children feel in this neighborhood right now. Now, I'm, maybe made of tougher stuff. I don't know, but that there is a marked change. And there needs to be an acknowledgement, and it shouldn't be that it's a bunch of privileged people who, are whining, because it's different. It is changed, and yes, we get it. It's not as bad, and of course we understand resources need to go where they're needed, but that doesn't mean they don't need to go here too. And don't forget that I think what we're hearing is people are crying out, and we get it too, how frustrating this is, that you can only do what you can do, and we appreciate all the work that you do on the streets and the legal system and the bureaucracy, but we need the mayor, we need people to understand, don't forget about all of us.
Okay, thank you.
So, well, I do want to react. I hope that you didn't feel like I was conveying a sense of the issues here are not important. The issues here, it is my job to represent this area. It is my job to try to get the MPD resources to address these kinds of issues. You're absolutely right that it feels different today than it felt a couple of years ago. This is a serious issue here. It's different than where people are used to hearing gunshots, where it's a weird night where there isn't a gunshot. When we have the number of gunshots that we've had in this area is completely different than a number of years ago. I totally get it. I also totally get it that we need to create an environment, ensure an environment where people feel safe, and in order to do that, they have to feel a lot safer than they do now. So I don't want to diminish it or make it seem like the concerns that are out there are not valid or important. They're critically important to me, and we have to, I'm trying to talk about the kinds of tangible things, but we're not done. We have to keep pushing in all different kinds of ways to make this place feel safer and make it feel like it meets the expectations that you had when you came, and it makes you feel like your daughter is safe and your children are safe. I'm not trying to say that's not a critically important thing. That's a fundamentally important thing, and it is probably the biggest part of my job. Public safety is first, and so I get it and want to do what I can to try to make it better. And if you felt like I was sending a message that I don't get that, I would want to address it.
Here, I'm coming to you. And I just want to say something to the people who are streaming at home and who submitted questions. Both the commander and Matt Frumin have all your questions as they were submitted. So they will be answered if they would like to do so. So only to the people here.
Thank you very much. Henry Newsom, citizen of the neighborhood. First, I want to thank Councilmember Frumin and Commander Branch for coming here tonight and holding this forum. And this is our republic at its best, so thank you. I want to focus on violent crime and homicide. I accept that both your prime responsibilities and threats we're facing in the areas, which tend to be nonviolent, but are not always, as we've heard about Rita. My biggest concern is violent crime for two reasons. First, our fellow citizens in Ward 7 and 8 are getting slaughtered, and unless they're killed by a police officer, no one seems to care, number one. And second, shame on me if I don't care when it's someone on the other side of the river, my family member is the next to catch a bullet. So we've talked a lot about accountability. There was a case that the House of Representatives threatened to invalidate recent DC Council legislation for the first time in 3 decades because the bill so grievously undermined the police during this horrible crime wave. It was so astonishing that some members relayed that they regretted their support for the bill after it reached the House of Representatives. More encouragingly is the legislation you've cited recently that passed the council later this summer had the support of the mayor and the police force. Yet we have on August 19th a Washington Post story stating that while the post-COVID crime wave that hit nearly every American urban area has started to recede, not in DC. Instead, homicide rates have reached their highest level since 2019 and significantly higher than 2022, and now 60% higher than 2019. That's homicide rates. Also, I understand, I think the stat was from you, that the average murder convict in DC has been arrested 13 times before. 11 times, sorry. Another prime number, double digits, before being convicted. So why has Rita committed so many crimes, been arrested so many times, and always released? And what are the biggest changes, Commander Branch, you would like to see that center on this theme of accountability from Councilmember Frumin, that we as citizens in this room can urge Councilmember Frumin to pursue on the council to increase accountability? And we keep sort of coming back to the U.S. Attorney's Office. We had you meet with the citizens in April. You joined in September, so we're getting all the bodies we need. Should we have the district's attorney office meet and join our next meeting?
Thank you. And I'm just going to say that they're going to make us leave this room close to 7:30. So.
Yes. Yeah, I don't want to make it seem like I'm pointing fingers at all. The attorney's office has a tough job. They really do. It's as the last meeting we had in April. Sometimes it's very difficult to prove beyond a reasonable doubt whether someone committed a crime. As you talked about your rims being stolen, without any identifying marks, how we know they're stolen, where did they come from, how we know they're yours, who's the complainant. There are a lot of issues and factors that come into play when you have that issue. The main thing as far as the police officer is concerned, we need to be supported. It's not just a matter of financially being supported. We need to be supported within our jobs as well. Officers, and I'm going to speak for them, I was an officer for 18 years before I got promoted, been on 31 now. When you do your job, you want to see results. You want to see that you're having an effect, a positive effect on the community. If you have what's her name, Rita? That when we deal with her, we get her the proper services, that she's being handled appropriately. And those that need to be put in jail need to be put in jail. You know, the message has to be sent. But like I said, if you don't have that accountability piece, then others will learn from that. And I think, in my opinion, this is totally my opinion, by the way, when you don't have those accountability at hand, then people feel that they can do what they want. Breaking the cars broad daylight, going to CVS, mass shoplifting, right? They go and they didn't do that years ago. They're doing it now because they feel they can. What's the consequences? And if I get caught, man, what's gonna happen? That's just my opinion, right? And that's just my opinion of being a police officer for over 31 years. So I'm not saying that everyone has to go to jail, don't get me wrong. And I do think we need services for people. But I think we're kind of looking at the kids at an older age. We have to really start to target these kids at a very, very, very young age, 4 years old even. We have to teach them proper manners, have after-school programs. This, you don't fight, this is how you say please, this is, and teach them, because they're not getting it at home. I grew up over there. Trust me, 3rd Street, I grew up over there. They're not getting, I was very fortunate to have good parents, to raise me properly, but they're not. And if they're not, then we have to teach them. We have to provide services for the parents as well, to teach them properly. How many times, and I don't know if you have or not, they're grabbing the kid by the arm and cursing and yelling and don't say hi to that police officer, they're gonna lock you the F up. And I mean, it's horrible, but these are how these kids are being taught. So how do they know anything other than that? But if we don't do that, you have this cycle. It's a vicious cycle that continues to go on and on. But I think we have to target them at a very, very young age. And like I said, the parents as well. Proper parenting, right? Help them with whatever issues they have. It's very frustrating when you don't have much money and you have other substance abuse issues, whatever the case may be. But we have to support them on that end. And if we do that, you won't have as much need for the police. We're not designed to deal with this volume of crime. We're just not. We don't have the manpower. Even if we had how many more officers? Like I said, this is a huge district. In fact, the 3rd district is about the size of just one PSA in the 2nd district, PSA 205, right? So that's what I think. We just need to deal with them at a younger age.
So I'm gonna take a little bit of a crack. On your point about Ward 7 and 8 and the tragedy of what's going on there. We had some folks in today in the office, and they were credible messengers. So they're folks who have been in the criminal justice system, come out, got onto their feet, trying to go back into their community and get kids off a path of violence. And this fellow talked about a situation where he works at one middle school, and there's gangs that are already forming around neighborhoods, and then they get into beefs with each other, and somebody took like a notebook or something, and the kid from the other crew was insisting that they give it back, and this guy was saying, no, I'm not giving it back. He wasn't going to back down. And the credible messenger said to him, do you want to get into a situation where 3 years from now you're looking back where somebody got killed over a notebook, and then there was a retaliation about that, and then there was a retaliation about that, and because you dug your heels in about this notebook and wouldn't back down an inch, 5 people are dead. And that sounds crazy, but the kid understood that was a possibility, and he gave the notebook back. And so you had somebody in the school who could be talking to him with credibility about not getting into that spiral. That kind of thing is important. The commander's reference to out-of-school time, after-school programs. This is going to be a big initiative for me in the fall to push for.
Attention Cleveland Park patrons, the time is now 7:30 and the library will be closing in 30 minutes. All meeting rooms are now closed for the evening. The library restrooms will close in 15 minutes.
So a big initiative for me is going to be to increase access to out-of-school time programs. I see it everywhere I go in the city. There are phenomenal people out there. You could be some of them who are working in schools, providing programs, teaching kids a skill, connecting with kids, the kinds of things that give kids a sense that they have a chance and that somebody cares about them. Those kinds of things are very important. On RETA, what are we gonna do about Rita? I honestly don't know the whole Rita situation. Tomorrow, I need to know the whole Rita situation. But we are in a situation where, you know, the commander talked about, it could be a situation where Rita's behavior is such that she should be evicted from wherever it is that she is, and that would send a message to other people as well. But that's a really hard thing to do in this environment. So how do you get to a place where there's a person who is creating a sense of unsafety for others, and we have a bunch of them. I mean, you're talking about this situation, but there are buildings where there's somebody who feels like they're being threatened by somebody else in the building, and what can we do about that? And we are looking hard at what kinds of things can we do to try to protect folks' sense of safety in the buildings in which they live. And frankly, the legal system, including through COVID, makes it harder, and it may be that we need to look at legislative fixes to try to address those kinds of issues. That's really hard. I'm not going to kid you. If we do something like that, that's going to be really tricky. But that's a thing that we're grappling with in our office. How do we get this balance better than it is right now, because it is an imbalance today.
Well, thank you so much. I'm sorry we have to cut this short. This has been a really informative discussion. I really appreciate the questions. I will say, Cleveland Park Community Association, if you want to continue the conversation, Elizabeth and I lead a safety committee now, I guess. Join us. So please join us. We have our ANC commissioners here too, and I encourage you to express your concerns to them about this issue as well. Thank you both so much. Hope you can
I just want to say one thing. I'm just more than welcome to come out whenever. I really am. Next week, next month, whatever you want, until we get this situation resolved. And we're going to look into Mimi as well. All right.
If you guys want to grab your seats and stack them on the sides, that would help, please. And thank you very much for coming.